He didn't walk up to Nancy Guthrie's door on January 31st unprepared. He didn't improvise. He didn't panic. Every step had been mapped. Every detail had been researched. And investigators have now confirmed that his planning began 7 months earlier, not in the moment, but in the months of careful, methodical preparation that nobody was watching for until it was too late. The internet is a record. Everything searched, every address typed, every name queried, it all leaves a trace. Most people don't think about that. They assume their browser history is private, their search is anonymous, their curiosity unremarkable, but law enforcement has learned something critical over the past decade. The digital breadcrumbs people leave behind tell a story. And in the Nancy Guthrie case, that story begins not on the night of the 31st of January 2026, but 7 months earlier, in the summer of 2025, when someone sat at a computer screen and began asking questions that only made sense if you already knew what you were looking for. The FBI doesn't release internet search data publicly without reason. When they do, it's because the timeline matters. It's because the progression of searches reveals intent. On the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared, investigators were already watching the digital trail. And what they found was this. Someone had been planning this for months. Not days, not weeks. Months. The kind of patient, methodical preparation that tells law enforcement something critical about who they're looking for. This is not someone who saw an opportunity and seized it. This is someone who built an opportunity and waited for the right moment to execute. The calendar shows us how. July 2025. 6 months before Nancy would be taken from her home. 6 months before a masked figure would stand at her front door. 6 months before a ransom demand would be sent to television stations with specific knowledge of her property. The planning began in July, and the first question asked was the simplest one. Where does Nancy Guthrie live? Before we understand what someone was looking for, we need to understand who Nancy was. She was an 84-year-old woman living alone in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona. She had lived in that city for over 50 years. She raised 3 children there, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. She worked at the University of Arizona for nearly 2 decades. She was a churchgoer. Every Sunday, without fail, she joined a virtual church service with a close friend. She was mentally sharp. She was independent. She lived alone in the house in the Catalina foothills. She also had limited mobility, she needed daily medication, her heart was fragile, she required a cardiac pacemaker to regulate her heartbeat. Those are medical facts, but they're also vulnerabilities. They're limitations that would be visible to anyone who spent time watching her, who knew her schedule, who understood her physical constraints. An 84-year-old woman with a fragile heart living alone is a specific target profile. She's not a random choice. Someone looked at those circumstances and saw an opportunity, but how would someone know those details about Nancy in the first place? The public record. Her address is findable, her daughter's name is findable, but her medical conditions, her limitations, her daily patterns, that requires more than a simple search. It requires time, it requires observation, it requires someone willing to spend weeks and months learning the rhythms of her life before making a move. July 2025, Tucson summer heat, the kind of heat where the pavement melts and nobody goes outside during the day. Nancy Guthrie was living her life in that heat, attending church, spending time with family, going about her routines. And somewhere, someone was typing her address into a search engine. The Google Trends data that the FBI released shows this clearly. In July 2025, searches for Nancy Guthrie's home address spiked. Not searches for Nancy Guthrie the person, searches for the specific address, the house in the Catalina foothills, the location. Investigators analyzing that data made a critical distinction. Someone was not searching for information about Nancy. They were searching for information about her property, location, position, where it sits in relation to other houses, what the street looks like, how accessible it is. That's not curiosity. That's reconnaissance. That's someone saying, I need to know where this house is. I need to be able to find it. I need to understand its position. Digital reconnaissance is what this is called. It's the first step in targeting. It's the moment when an idea becomes an intention. For the first time, in July 2025, someone had decided, that's the house. That's the target. Now I need to learn everything about it. But they didn't stop with the address. They didn't stop with where does Nancy Guthrie live. Because while the location matters, location alone doesn't create the kind of opportunity that makes a crime like this possible. You also need to know why it matters. You need to know what makes the target worth targeting. You need to know what the payoff would be. And that's where the investigation gets interesting, because 5 months after searching for Nancy's address, someone began asking a very different question. December 2025, 5 months after the July search for Nancy's home address, the planning has been moving quietly. No alerts, no flags, just someone somewhere building a file on this family. And in December, the searches shift. The focus moves from the property to the person connected to it. Someone searched for Savannah Guthrie's salary. That's not incidental information. That's not something you search for out of casual interest. That's something you search for when you're building a financial profile, when you're calculating what someone is worth, when you're thinking about ransom, when you're asking yourself, if I take this 4-year-old woman, how much will her daughter pay to get her back? Savannah Guthrie is a prominent television anchor. Her annual salary is public record. It ranges from $8 million to $24 million, depending on the year. Her net worth is estimated in the tens of millions. Those are the numbers someone in December 2025 was looking at. Those are the calculations someone was making. If Nancy Guthrie's daughter earns that much money, how much would she pay? $1 million? $2 million, $4 million, $6 million. The ransom demand that would come 7 weeks later, asking for $6 million in Bitcoin, was not a random number. It was calibrated, it was calculated, someone had done the math. They had looked at Savannah's earning potential, her family wealth, her position in the media industry, and they had decided what price they thought the Guthrie family could and would pay. That calculation began in December 2025 when someone typed Savannah Guthrie's name into a search engine and began asking about her salary. But now we're getting into specificity, location, income, calculation. Someone was building a plan. But the plan needs more than just information. It needs timing. It needs to know when the target will be home. It needs to know the daily routines. It needs to know the patterns and rhythms of how Nancy Guthrie lives her life. And for that kind of detailed intelligence, you don't use the internet. You go to the property, you watch, you observe. You become a familiar presence without being noticed. You conduct physical surveillance. But before the physical surveillance begins, there's one more digital step. In December 2025, investigators confirmed that additional searches were conducted related to the Nancy Guthrie family, searches about the neighborhood, the Catalina Foothills property values, the layout of streets in the area, the proximity to major roads, the kind of searches someone makes when they're building a tactical picture, when they're asking, if I'm here, which way would I go? How would I leave? What are the exit routes? What are the traffic patterns at different times of night? December 2025 is the month the plan becomes specific. Not, I want to target a wealthy family, but I will target the Guthrie family at this address, with this person vulnerable, at this time of night, and I will ask for this amount of money. The digital footprint in December is the moment intention becomes actionable planning. And then the searches stop, because at that point, searching is counterproductive. At that point, you need to see with your own eyes, you need to stand where the house sits, you need to watch the streets, you need to understand the neighborhood, you need to see Nancy Guthrie with your own eyes, you need to watch the patterns of her life. And that's when the surveillance shifts from digital to physical. That's when someone gets in a car and drives to the Catalina foothills. The 11th of January, 2026. 3 weeks before Nancy Guthrie would disappear, law enforcement confirmed that someone had been surveilling her property. Not the entire month, but specific dates, specific times. And the sheriff's office confirmed they had reviewed neighbor security camera footage from January 11th. Someone had been there, someone had watched the house, someone had studied the property in person. What would someone be looking for on January 11th? The position of the doorbell camera, the layout of the front entrance, whether lights were on or off, what time Nancy came home, what time she turned off lights, whether a car was in the driveway, whether she answered her door for deliveries, whether she looked through the peephole or opened the door directly, whether she lives alone or whether there are other people in the house. All of these are surveillance objectives. All of these are questions that can be answered by standing in the street for an hour or two, watching the house, taking notes, understanding the rhythms. On January 11th, someone did that. They were there, they watched, and then they left. The surveillance was brief. It was not about making a move. It was about gathering information. It was about confirming that the target profile was correct, that Nancy lives alone, that she's vulnerable, that the house is accessible, that the timing would work. But one observation is not enough. One date is not enough. You need confirmation. You need to see the pattern repeat. You need to verify that what you observed on January 11th was consistent with how the target lives. You need to be certain, and that's why the surveillance was repeated. The 24th of January, 2026, 13 days after the first confirmed surveillance, 1 week before the abduction. Someone returned to the Catalina foothills. Someone stood near Nancy Guthrie's property again and watched. The sheriff confirmed this detail. The footage existed. The observation was documented. This was not a coincidence. This was the second planned surveillance date. This was someone verifying what they had learned on January 11th. What changes between January 11th and January 24th? Information. Confirmation, updated intelligence. Maybe on January 11th, someone was uncertain about what time Nancy left for her Saturday evening dinner, but on January 24th, they were checking, making sure, confirming that the pattern held. That on Saturday nights, Nancy goes to her daughter Annie's house, that the drive takes about 15 minutes, that the car arrives back home around 9:45 or 9:50 p.m., that the garage door closes, that Nancy is alone inside, that she goes to bed a short time later. All of this would be visible from physical surveillance, and all of this would be confirmed on January 24th. The second surveillance date was the final verification. It was the go or no-go moment. On January 24th, someone stood in that neighborhood and made a final decision. Yes, the pattern is what I expected. The timing is what I calculated. The vulnerability is what I identified. We proceed. January 31st, this is the night. But what exactly was someone looking for during those two surveillance dates? What specific details were worth standing in the dark, watching a house, risking detection, waiting for information? The answer lies in understanding what every detail of the operation required. A successful abduction is not improvised. Every detail has to work. The timing, the access, the surprise, the victim's compliance, the escape route, the vehicle, the ransom demand, all of it has to function together. And for that to happen, you need to know specific things. You need to know the exact position of the doorbell camera. Not approximately, exactly. You need to know where it points, what angle it covers, whether it can see someone standing to the left or the right of the frame. This is why the suspect, on the night of January 31st, reached toward a potted plant near the entrance and carefully used foliage to cover the lens. He knew exactly where that plant was. He knew exactly how much reach he would have. He knew exactly what would happen when the lens was obscured. That's not deduced on the spot. That's information gathered during surveillance. You need to know the layout of the front entrance. Is it recessed? Is it exposed to the street? How much light is there? How visible is it from neighboring properties? Can someone stand at the door without being visible from the road? These are critical security questions, and they can only be answered through physical observation. You need to know Nancy's response pattern. Will she answer the door for someone she doesn't know? Will she call out before opening? Will she look through the peephole? Will she be afraid of a stranger in the dark? These are behavioral questions. They can be partially educated guesses based on her age and isolation, but confirmation comes from surveillance, from watching, from understanding the specific person, not the general stereotype. You need to know her medical situation. Not just that she has a pacemaker, but where is she in her routine? Is she awake or asleep? Is she mobile or immobile? Could she physically resist? How quickly could she call for help? These details matter because they determine the level of force that would be required. And the suspect's behavior on January 31st, calm, patient, not aggressive in the doorbell footage, suggests someone confident that force would not be necessary. That suggests surveillance had confirmed Nancy would comply. You need to know the neighborhood patterns. Which houses have people awake at 2 a.m.? Which houses have exterior lights on? What are the traffic patterns? How often do cars pass? How long would someone have between entry and departure before a neighbor might notice something unusual? These are operational security questions. They determine the window of opportunity. And the fact that the operation was executed between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m., a very specific time, suggests that surveillance had determined this was the optimal window. All of this knowledge came from somewhere, and Pima County Sheriff confirmed it came from 2 surveillance dates. January 11th, January 24th, 2 opportunities to stand at that property and gather the information that would make January 31st possible. But surveillance wasn't just about Nancy. It was also about understanding the technology she lived with. The doorbell camera, the Wi-Fi system, the interior video monitors, the pacemaker device, the power systems. All of these are technological elements, and the suspect's preparation suggests a sophisticated understanding of how these systems work and how to defeat them. The doorbell camera was covered with foliage, not smashed or removed. That specific choice tells forensic analysts something critical. If the goal was to avoid detection by law enforcement later, you would destroy the camera, but the goal here was different. The goal was to maximize the probability that Nancy would answer the door. If Nancy looked at her indoor video monitor and saw a masked stranger's face staring back at her, she would be afraid. She would not open the door. She would call police. But a covered lens is ambiguous. Maybe the camera malfunctioned, maybe something is just blocking the view. It's not immediately threatening, it's not immediately the signal of danger that would cause someone to refuse to open their door. That distinction, cover it, don't destroy it, tells us the suspect understood doorbell camera technology specifically. He understood the pacemaker device well enough to anticipate that its shutdown would coincide with Nancy's removal from the property. He may have even understood how Wi-Fi jammer technology works, given that the sheriff confirmed investigators are looking into whether electrical disruption was used in the area that night. This level of technical knowledge doesn't develop overnight. It's not something you learn by Googling how to break into a house. It's something you learn through research, study, or prior experience. It's knowledge that would have been part of the 7-month planning process. Someone studying exactly how these systems work, how they communicate, how they can be defeated. And if we're being forensically precise, the suspect also understood Nancy's specific medical situation well enough to anticipate that removing her from the house would result in the pacemaker losing its signal by 2:28 a.m. That's not a guess. That's knowledge based on the pacemaker's specific technical specifications and Nancy's location. It suggests the suspect had accessed specific information about Nancy's medical device, information that would have been research conducted during the planning phase. All of this preparation, the digital searches, the physical surveillance, the technical research, converged on a single 40-minute window from 1:47 a.m., when Nancy's doorbell camera went offline, to 2:28 a.m., when her pacemaker lost its signal. In those 40 minutes, the entire crime happened. Nancy was removed from her home, she was transported somewhere, the suspect escaped. All of it took place in darkness, in a quiet residential neighborhood, and nobody saw anything because the suspect had spent 7 months learning exactly how to do it. The doorbell camera going offline at 1:47 a.m. was not an accident. The Wi-Fi disruption was not coincidental. It was timed, it was planned, it was expected. The suspect knew approximately what time this would happen because he had studied the technology, he had studied the power systems, he had studied the patterns. The motion detection at 2:12 a.m., 25 minutes after the camera went offline, suggests movement at the property, not in the house, outside. The suspect moving in and out, the transfer beginning, the abduction in progress. The pacemaker signal loss at 2:28 a.m. is the most definitive marker in this entire case. It tells investigators that Nancy was no longer in the house, she was somewhere else. Somewhere the pacemaker could no longer reach the hospital's monitoring system, somewhere 40 minutes away from her home, or the device had been damaged, or she was no longer with the device at all. All of this, the timing, the precision, the darkness, the technical preparation, came from 7 months of planning. It was not improvisation, it was execution of a plan. So what did 7 months of planning actually produce? What was the tangible result of all that preparation? A suspect who knew exactly where to stand, who knew exactly how to cover the camera, who knew exactly when Nancy would be home, who knew exactly what to say or do to make her open the door, who knew exactly how long he would have, who knew exactly how to escape, who knew exactly how to avoid detection in a neighborhood full of potential witnesses. The ransom note sent to television stations with specific property details that only someone with direct knowledge would know. The correct names of news anchors, the correct addresses of media companies, the demonstration of insider knowledge that made law enforcement believe the threat was credible, the $6 million Bitcoin demand calibrated to Savannah Guthrie's annual salary range, not random, not arbitrary, but calculated. The choice of February 9th as the deadline given enough time to arrange payment without giving law enforcement time to set up an interception. All of it was planned, all of it was thought through, and all of it came together because someone had spent 7 months learning this family, learning their vulnerabilities, learning their connections, learning their patterns, learning their financial situation, learning their psychology. This is not a crime born from opportunity. This is not someone who saw a chance and took it. This is someone who created a chance, who built it, who planned it meticulously, and then executed it with precision. On the 31st of January 2026, at approximately 9:48 p.m., Nancy Guthrie's garage door closed. She was home, she was alone, she was vulnerable. And everything that had been set in motion in July was about to come to conclusion. The suspect approached the property. He covered the camera with foliage. He waited. He knocked. Nancy opened the door. Whether she recognized him, whether she was afraid, whether she understood what was happening, we don't know yet. What we know is this: she did not scream. She did not call for help. She did not physically resist in a way that would alert neighbors. Within 40 minutes, she was gone. The plan worked. 7 months of preparation, 2 surveillance dates, multiple internet searches, technical research. All of it culminated in a crime that was executed with such precision that nobody saw it happen, nobody heard it, nobody realized what was being taken from the house at 2:12 a.m. until the next morning when Nancy didn't show up for church. As of today, the 15th of March, 2026, Nancy Guthrie has not been found, no arrest has been made, no suspect has been publicly identified, but the timeline is clear. The planning is documented. The preparation is real, and somewhere, someone has the knowledge of what happened during that 40-minute window. Someone knows what the 7 months of planning was designed to accomplish. Someone knows whether Nancy Guthrie is still alive. The case is not cold, the investigation is not stalled, and the suspect who spent 7 months preparing for this moment is still out there, still uncaught, still unknown. If you have information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, call the FBI. Call the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Do it today. Because the person who planned this for 7 months might be planning something else. And the longer this remains unsolved, the longer that person remains free to prepare for something else. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home, and the plan that took her needs to be exposed.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more information like this. Thanks. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.